Holodeck 3 program is reinstated.
Open sesame!
Commander Klingon vessel. We are energizing transporter beam. Now.
One, engage!
All right, hello, welcome everyone to Star Trek from the Holodeck. I forgot the name of our show for a second.
You almost lost yourself like a Boimler in this one.
Yeah. Hey, did you shift yourself in your chair? You seem out of frame now on the camera here. Go ahead.
Again.
We're going to do some production work live on the air right now. Go ahead and move to camera right just a bit. Camera right. Camera right.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's right.
There you go. Come on, David. Are you losing your film knowledge? There you go.
There you go.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
That's a bit better.
Yeah. See, I have to keep David in check from time to time. All right. If you're new to our discussions here, you can find all of our shows, the podcast version of this broadcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. Our preferred feeds are iTunes and Spotify. Just simply search From the Holodeck. And if you are a YouTube type of person, you can catch our live video feeds on our network YouTube page, youtube.com/RainmanDigital. Be sure to click subscribe and give us a thumbs up. But I will warn you, I am ugly, and I do not want to make you get freaked out. I don't want to freak you out.
We don't have the glories of the holodeck.
Yeah, just like the last episode of Lower Decks was appalling and perverse, that's what my face is. So be warned. All right, so we are here today once again to discuss Star Trek Lower Decks Season 3, Episode 8, Crisis Point 2, Paradoxus? Is that the name of the episode? Yeah.
What did you say, Mike, in the last episode? Ups and downs this season.
Yeah, ups and downs, because we went from one of the most shittiest episodes I've ever seen to one of the greatest if not greatest episode of Lower Decks to date. What is going on in that writing room this year, Dave? It's just, is it like, are they drinking like, are they having like high brain foods with lots of nutrition on one night, and then they go out and get drunk the next day, and they come into the writing room and they have no brain cells to write? Because it is up and down this season.
It's almost like, I don't know what it is. It's like Mike McMahon decides to give his writing team the day off after an episode and basically says, hey, I'll just bring in an intern to do this one.
There's no median. There's no median. Yeah, there's just highs and lows. It is literally the 2021 and 2022 stock market. It's what it is.
It feels like it, because like, especially like, we went from a very light character-driven episode in Peanut Hampers episode to suddenly,
I hate that name too. I just hate it.
We have like absolutely the most amazing character development in Tendi, slightly Rutherford, definitely Boimler.
Oh, yeah.
And even like in Mariner, because like Mariner has to play a role that she is not used to, which is the supporting role.
Yeah.
And it was so interesting seeing her grow into that, because like and connecting it narratively to her throughout the entire season, where she's trying to be a better person. And it connects so well to the Deep Space Nine episode, where she's trying to be a better person and be supportive, because she wants to be, like in the Deep Space Nine episode, she wanted to be with that one, her one lover at that point. And in this one, she's just trying to be a good friend, because she wants to support Boimler, and it's like so hilarious, because she sees him falling, and she's the one that basically saying, no, it's good. I mean, I think I like this story. The ideas sound, and it's so different getting it from Mariner's point of view. Meanwhile, the neurotic one is Boimler, but what's so amazing about this episode is like the craziness of Boimler is so relatable that it's like he had an existential crisis. And
Absolutely.
Who doesn't really have the one moment in their life where they go, what the fuck is the meaning of life?
One moment. And that's every day of my life, David.
Yeah.
I wake up like, why am I here?
Why am I here?
What is the meaning of this?
And then on top of that, dude, that twist in the end, again, Mike McMahon setting up things for the future.
Yeah. So, yeah, just as a reminder, let's kind of set the stage here. This is a sequel of sorts to Crisis Point, The Rise of Vindicta, which I think is probably my favorite episode of Lower Decks, possibly until this point. I'm not quite sure. I would have to, honestly, I need to watch the Ascending episode again, where that one officer ascended. I love that episode.
I love that episode, yeah.
And the Badgie episode, the Crisis Point Part 1, the Deep Space Nine episode, and then Crisis Point 2 here.
Paradoxus.
You need to watch those 5 episodes and see which one's the best, because those 5 episodes are some of the strongest writing of Lower Decks.
I'll go out on a limb and basically ahead of you and say I think I like Paradoxus the most, because
there's a lot of smarts.
There's a lot of smarts at play going on in this episode, and honestly, this truly felt like a Star Trek episode.
Yeah, and we'll get into that, Dave, because you're right. There's I don't know if I'm going to be able to word it the same way as I did before the show started. It's hard to put this episode into words, but it took the writing cues of Star Trek and what it does. You know, social commentary, right, is one.
Yes.
Philosophy, you know, understanding or dissecting the human condition, which let's just encompass that all under philosophy to simplify things. And it took those ingredients, those raw ingredients that truly make up the foundation of any Star Trek series. And they, in a very meta, self-referential way, that in a way that they are aware of their show, they're aware of Star Trek, they're aware of fans, and they used it in the same way Star Trek uses those aspects, the tropes of Star Trek, to say something. They use that. They say something about Star Trek as a fandom, Star Trek fans, and its place in fandom, which that's not easy to do.
No.
And they were able to do that.
And not only that, they have to make it digestible to the audience because they're doing it in a humor way.
Yeah, I'm sure there's people out there that didn't really catch all of that, because you're right. This episode works as just simply a fun episode as well. But when you really, I watched this episode twice, because the first time I watched it, I was like, okay, this is a good episode. It has something to say. It's just written well. There's a lot of character development. But then I watched it again because there was something else elusive. And when I watched it the second time, I purposely didn't pay attention to the character development aspects and just focused on what the episode is saying, which is something you and I talk about a lot. When you talk about what an episode of whatever is about, it's not the plot. The plot's not what the story is about. What is being said? That's what the story's about. And that's what I was looking for. I was looking for true symptomatic meaning in a cinematic context.
Because it just adds layers to your narrative. I mean, like, an example I think I could think of is when it's Boimler when he talks about the chronogami, and he tells Freeman that the chronogami, I think I have it right here. Yeah. Freeman just explained that the chronogami can be used to destroy any point in history. Mariner then basically says, what does that? It makes an alternate cinematic timeline that runs concurrently to our own, but with like different people playing younger versions of us, and then Teddy Basie laughs and says scientifically that would be a bit of a reach.
Yeah.
And it's stuff like that.
It's fun because, as I said, it's commenting on itself and it's commenting on the fandom in this like dynamic, phenomenological type of aspect where it's talking about the experiences of Star Trek in all shapes and form. And they use that whole meta angle to really do something like that, like critique itself. It's literally critiquing with these comments. It's not just tongue in cheek necessarily. There's definitely some tongue in cheek there, but it's also some critique, some relevant critique on itself, which you don't always see that in the form of Star Trek. So let's get official here. These episodes, these Crisis Point episodes, predominantly take place in the holodeck. And if we were talking, and if we are talking in universe, meaning canon, they function as holo novels.
Yes.
The idea behind these episodes work on the same meta level as I was saying a few moments ago that Lower Decks operates on, but it delved much deeper, or at least these Crisis Point episodes. They delve deeper into the meta-style narratives that effectively break the fourth wall because as far as nostalgia is concerned, they look back. That's what these episodes do. They look back and are even more self-referential than a typical Lower Decks episode, because there's an argument to be made that pretty much every single episode of Lower Decks is making a comment on itself. But this took it up and design an entire narrative to make a comment and somewhat of a critique on itself and all of its forms, whether that be fan dumb and all of that's included, such as fan fiction. I mean, you even had a moment where Mariner says that this is like fan fiction.
Fan fiction.
So they're fun. They're fun episodes. They are written like Star Trek feature films, and they follow similar beats by pretty much working within a template of an actual movie. That's what this episode did specifically. For the most part, it was doing the beats of Star Trek Generations, for the most part. So in this episode, we get more of a world within a world.
Yeah.
By the continuation of the so-called Vindicta-verse. So they're creating a verse in a verse. A universe in a universe. It's meta inception extravaganza. When you're dealing with episodes like this, it feels more like a love letter to the franchise. In a sense, it functions, as I was saying, as a commentary on the relationship between fan and franchise.
Yes.
So what did this episode do? It borrows heavily from Star Trek Generations. The plot, as well as the callbacks, gives that away, but also the overall aesthetic is reminiscent of Generations. For example, the three, and not just aesthetics, but also some of its inclusions of character and character types. You have the three Romulan sisters, which are clearly mirroring the Duras sisters.
The Duras sisters, yes.
They're not as hot, though. I mean, as a kid, I was, because everyone knows I love evil women, and when I first saw the Duras sisters in the 90s,
I think their boobs were the first thing you saw.
I was like, oh my God, why is everyone appalled by you? I love you.
I love you.
Please.
I don't know why.
Didn't they lick Worf in the face a couple times? I'm like, yes, please. I will. Worf, don't pretend that disgusts you.
They were dirty, man. They were dirty, but we loved them anyway.
Yeah. They were great. So the Romulan sisters weren't nearly as hot as the Duras sisters. They didn't have that animalistic sexual behavior that us sickos really like. There were also some allusions to Star Trek, The Voyage Home, Star Trek 4, and then also Star Trek, The Final Frontier. And you know me, when it comes to episodes of Star Trek, I'm all about theme and what the writers are trying to say, and whatever they may be doing, hopefully at the same time adds to character development, because you can have all the fun you want, especially with a show like Lower Decks, but also give us that much needed development. And with this episode, there is an underlying existentialism in the same fashion. I can't talk, Dave. I'm obviously too excited here. Let me start over. With this episode, there's an underlining existentialism in the same fashion as Generations. Boimler is struggling with the death of his duplicate.
Yeah, William.
Picard was struggling with the death of his brother and his nephew. And if you remember, he didn't know what he needed to do any longer when it came to his family line, because essentially with them dead, he
was the last
of his bloodline. So there's a little bit of existentialism there, because he lost the meaning of his life. The meaning of his life was to explore, to be a part of Starfleet, to be the captain of a ship. That was his meaning. That was his purpose in life. And suddenly, they threw in that wrench there into his life, and it caused him to doubt his purpose his meaning and whether or not he's doing what he should be doing. And that's the same thing they did with Boimler. And I thought that was such a nice touch, because it works with Boimler's development thus far. The fact that he's always looking for that meaning and that purpose and a sense of belonging. And for something like this to happen, it actually works for a character, for this type of character.
Well, the point when, we had a really fun, really engaging episode up to the point, and then when they get to the point between the talk between Mariner and Ransom, when Ransom tells Mariner, hey, did Boimler actually tell you what's going on? And she doesn't say anything. She says that he's just being moody. And then Ransom drops the bomb.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, about his, the transporter brother of his that basically died. And then suddenly the episode went from fun and engaging to all of a sudden, we're going to throw some serious overtones now at you.
Yeah.
And they did it so successfully, because in a lot of ways, there's some bad Star Trek episodes out there that have tried to do that, and it just destroys an episode.
It doesn't always work.
It doesn't work, because you're going from fun, happy-go-lucky to all of a sudden, let's get serious.
Yeah.
Here, they did it so seamlessly, and they ran it parallel with each other that it elevated the episode up. It made you feel like the episode was just that had much more impact and a much more punch to it.
There's something about existentialism that just works, and probably because it's a branch of philosophy which is in the DNA of Star Trek to begin with, existentialism as a way to understand is definitely a part of the philosophical branches, and it just works. It feels it's such a perfect fit for Star Trek when they utilize it. Obviously, we don't want all of our Star Trek, the entire season, to be an existential
crisis.
Yeah, because that would probably change the tone of Star Trek. But even when you look at Star Trek Enterprise, every series of Star Trek usually takes, in my opinion, except maybe Strange New Worlds, it kind of knocked it out the park pretty quickly. But you always have that one definitive episode that is the signal for its impending greatness. Voyager did it with Neelix when he lost his faith in the afterlife.
Yes.
And from that moment on, Voyager became amazing. Then you had with Enterprise, it was after the destruction of Florida when Archer halfway through just became existential and lost sight of himself, what Starfleet was supposed to stand for, and he starts questioning that.
Yes.
Because they suddenly find themselves seeking a species that want to annihilate humanity, and what are they going to do when they get to them?
Exactly.
They're going to kill them?
Are you going to fight them?
What do you do? That's not what Starfleet's supposed to do. That's not what I'm supposed to do, meaning Archer. So you always have those moments of existentialism that really kicks off a series. And that's something that this show, or I should say Lower Decks, a specific episode, really did to capture those moments of excellence when it comes to the existential side of Star Trek.
Well, that's why I'm glad you brought up the Generations example, where Picard's story, and I'm going to say something that might be controversial to people, but honestly, Generations to me is where Picard's story gets very interesting, because when he gets that message that his brother and his nephew die, the idea of an existential crisis for Picard at that point was more powerful than anything he's ever felt. Because just like you said, it challenged what he felt. This is my destiny. I'm supposed to be the captain. I'm supposed to be on that captain's chair. It tied so well with Kirk telling him, don't let them force you out of that chair.
Right.
But throwing it in parallel in crisis mode, because when his brother and his nephew die, then the question becomes, are you sure this is what you're supposed to be doing?
Right.
Because now your family lineage is all on you.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things I really do enjoy from Picard is the fact that they carried that on, because in Picard you realize he gave it up because he had to go back to the farm. He had to go back to the vineyard and run the chateau because he is the last one. He is the last of his lineage.
He's like Sean Connery in Dragonheart. I am the last one.
And like, it was amazing.
No one's going to catch that reference.
only people as old as me and you are. But like, when Boimler goes through it, it felt so organic because it was understandable, because Boimler wasn't grieving over the fact of losing a quote unquote family member. He was grieving over him. It was about him.
Yeah.
Because he was like, he kept the point that I thought was so powerful in a cartoon about making funny jokes is Boimler looking at Mariner and saying he was on Titan. He was doing better than him, and suddenly he snuffed out. And then he basically said, what does that mean for me? And I'm like going, wow, that's a really powerful statement by Boimler. Mm-hmm. Because it questions, he was happy being in the lower decks, but look what happened with William. William was on the Titan. He was successful. And in one blink of an eye, he got snuffed out, at least to what Boimler thinks.
Right. Well, most of us until the ending.
Until the very end. And then like, when you get to when you actually get to that is like, for me, one of the crux of great Star Trek storytelling is when you actually have these characters really asking themselves the human question, basically, what is the meaning of life?
Yeah. What does God need with a starship?
What does God need with a starship? And it's like, I love those moments in Star Trek when that happens, because like it harkens back to like one of my favorite moments in Star Trek, like the motion picture, where Kirk and Spock are meeting for the first time in a long, or I know it was Kirk and Bones meeting in the study of Kirk, and Bones looking at Kirk and saying, "Hey, don't become like your collection."
Yes, that was Star Trek 2.
That was Star Trek 2, right?
Yeah.
And like, that's one of my favorite moments, because that
was good.
That really made the whole story about Kirk, about the human nature.
So that's why, again, that shows us why Mick McMahon does know Star Trek, except for maybe that blunder last episode, because he's borrowing those moments of Star Trek, because that's not what Star Trek's about per se, but some of the greatest moments of emotion stem from a moment of existentialism that our characters are feeling. And that's why this episode also just feels very authentic and sincere. Now, outside of that, the episode mostly is concerned with commentary on fandom arguments, as well as its own tongue-in-cheek critiques. For example, the conflict between Mariner and Boimler about the creation of the holodeck program. Yes. Mariner insists that it is a bad movie that goes against everything the Vindictiverse stood for and is ruining the franchise. Boimler rebuttals by saying that he is creating an important examination of the human condition. I hate to say that. That sounds like something I would say.
No, when he said that, dude, I'm going, God damn it, Boimler is us.
Yeah. Well,
damn it.
Yep. So despite its silliness, the episode actually serves, I would definitely say, as an intelligent commentary on fan culture, what it means to be a fan, and a reconciliation of sorts.
Well, even with like the story of Tindy and Rutherford, I mean, that in itself was also a talk about like fandom, and basically how like some fans take things really seriously, some fans don't take it that seriously, and that's what irritates people.
That's right. Yeah.
And it's like, that's stuff like that. They took a simple statement with Tindy and Rutherford, and just started adding layers onto it. Not only talking about fans, but also, hey, we're going to show the depth of their relationship. We're going to show growth in their relationship. How at the very end, Rutherford comes to understand Tindy, and actually apologizes. Says, "Shoot, I didn't know that you really took it seriously." And Rutherford telling Tindy that he would be really happy to be. Have her as his captain.
Right. That's what's interesting about this episode, because it was commenting on itself and fan culture. It shows that reconciliation. That's what I was alluding to. The fact that, okay, so we can argue, we can all have different views, but at the end of this, we all should just come together and accept that Star Trek does mean different things for different people.
Yeah.
Now, that also doesn't forgive the perverseness of the last episode, but I get the point. I definitely can agree with the overall statement, the essence of that comment.
And if anything else, also when you get to the big quote unquote, I'm not even gonna call it an Easter egg, but like the ending with Sulu, you have George Takei,
yeah,
apparently taking the farm of Captain Kirk, and Sulu owning the farm in Captain Kirk's
Wyoming
Nexus.
Is that where? Oh,
where
yeah.
it is his Nexus point.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're taking the two people who do not get along well.
Yeah.
And we all know.
It's pretty embarrassing.
It's pretty
honestly.
embarrassing. We all know.
Yeah.
But the fact that you bring those two and you bring them together, again, showing, hey, we can still all have fun.
Yeah.
That's the thing I think was the beauty.
But that's also
it.
It's also once again Star Trek commenting on self, because we understand, how the fandom argues. Now it's bringing to light another argument that it's not a part of the story world per se. When I say story world, I'm talking about the narrative of Star Trek. But in a lot of ways, in a transmedia type sense, much of the off-screen personas, because Star Trek is so big and iconic, especially when you're talking about characters like Sulu and William Shatner, or George Takei and William Shatner, it does, in a sense, craft its own off-screen narrative that becomes part of the diegesis of Star Trek. Whether it belongs in canon or not, it becomes a part of that landscape. And that's why it's so smart. It's such a smart way to include that aspect, that high-profile argument where you have George Takei taking William Shatner's place.
William Shatner's place.
I mean, he's literally making a comment on that as well.
Yeah.
Not that, of course, George Takei never took William Shatner's place, but I'm just talking about, in the sense, it embodies, it's a good metaphor for their arguments, which is, again, embarrassing. It's just,
it's just funny.
They should be ashamed of themselves. Well, first off, I love George Takei.
Yes.
He's amazing. And I love William Shatner, but I'm sorry, I'm team William Shatner all day, because and let's just get a roll call here, and people can agree or disagree in the comment section or on our Twitter accounts. Shatner doesn't ever say anything like really bad.
Have you noticed that?
He does. He will comment in a very kind of like shrug manner, which is exactly what I would do if someone's constantly talking about
badgering
me
you
in interviews, tweeting at me after I get off a spaceship, and you call me fat. That's what George Takei did.
Yeah.
Called William Shatner a fat, bloated pig or something. That Jeff Bezos is using him as a fat guinea pig. I think that's what he said.
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing. Don't get mad at me. I'm not quoting. But my point is that George Takei has a history of saying some pretty foul shit.
Yeah.
And unbecoming things about William Shatner. And William Shatner always just kind of takes this arrogant stance, but he doesn't really comment on George Takei's appearance, his way of life, whatever that may be. He doesn't do any actual commentary.
Yeah, he does.
About him. He just says that he's crazy, and I don't understand why he's still talking about this.
I don't know. And that's the thing, is like, nowadays it's like,
and the reason why we're even talking about this, because this is the perfect episode to talk about this type of stuff.
Precisely.
This is literally a part of the fan culture.
And it is. That's the thing, is like, people nowadays, even in Star Trek today, they take the side of either George Takei or William Shatner. And I'm with you. I mean,
I don't think George Takei is a bad person.
I don't think he's a bad person.
I think there might be some sexual frustration there. I think they just need to fuck. I mean, it's probably like 50 plus years of just being backed up. Maybe they're attracted to each other. Just get it out of the way.
But just get it out of the way. Just get it out of the way. You know, William Shatner should just go, do you just want me?
You go, I'm the captain of this ship. I'm the captain of this ship. Let me tongue your hole.
No, Mike, no.
That's not an image I want to see.
I don't want it. I don't want that image.
Yeah,
no,
it's not. Maybe if they were not to be an ageist, but maybe if they were 50 years younger, it wouldn't be as disturbing. I mean, again, I'm not into homoerotic, maybe sometimes for fun, for kicks and giggles.
For kicks and giggles.
So stupid. All right, Dave. So you were going to say you were on team who?
I'm on team William Shatner just because to me, he's been the most professional out of the duo.
Yeah. Whatever he does on set, that's his job.
And that's the thing too.
It's not really up to someone to call you out on your manner of professionalism. If that's the way you do your business, if you treat it where you don't fraternize and you don't, or you're protecting your brand, which for years, a little bit of that ego was because I am the captain. Enough of you trying to always step in the limelight. It's me and DeForest Kelley and Leonard Nimoy. We are the draw. And for 30 some years, they were the draw.
Yeah.
It's changed over time because George Takei has become more popular, I'd say, over the last 15 years because of social media, and he's just out there all the time.
And also during that time, the fandom has grown to the point to accept all of the characters.
Yeah.
But back then, people have to understand when it came down to it, who was on top of that call sheet? Leonard Nimoy, DeForest Kelley, and William Shatner.
Yeah.
It sucks for everybody else. And I know that basically a lot of the gripes, especially when you look at like interviews and everything else, everyone complained that, they were underpaid.
Well, George Takei needs to remember how the Hollywood system works.
The Hollywood
he
system
should know that he gets paid more because he's Captain Kirk.
Yeah,
that's how it works. People, there's not equality of pay. Doesn't operate the way you think in this type of business. It's about who has the biggest star power. Why are people buying tickets? I love Sulu as a character, but if you tried to make a Sulu movie in the 80s without the rest of them, it just wouldn't have worked.
It wouldn't have worked.
Now, maybe a little different with streaming, seeing him as a captain, maybe even that's different. It's a whole other story. But then, yeah, right. Can you imagine?
No way.
Yeah.
I mean, even Gene Roddenberry said that it was not that time. It was not the time to actually make Sulu, Uhura, Scotty, all of them basically main players.
And I think George Takei's best performance of all time and all of Star Trek is Star Trek 6 when he becomes a captain.
Yeah, by far.
I fucking love him in that role. So good, so convincing. So anyways, all right, so let's wrap this up. Lower Decks in an episode like this is, as I said, is being used to do something similar, and that's why... Well, hold on, let me backtrack. I'm jumping way ahead here. I'm going to give this episode a 90%. Because an episode of Lower Decks like this is being used to do something smart. It's doing something similar... It's doing something similar to Star Trek that were, like I said at the beginning of the show, similar in form, but for fan culture. It functions and engages with established Star Trek iconography as well as its semiotics in order to comment on them, using the formula of Trek, essentially, by inverting the engagement. Typically, we engage and comment on Star Trek. Here, we have Star Trek engaging and commenting on us and itself. That is clever. And my brain hurts when I was writing the notes. I'm like, okay, wait, it's doing this, and that. Okay.
Yes.
So it might even be higher than a 90%. You know what? I'm going to give it a 93%. I think it's that good. Which, how do you go from 58% to 93%? I don't know.
I don't know.
That's the question that I cannot answer. What about you, Dave?
I'm in similar score as you. I actually gave this a 95 because it's the highest score I've given season 3 thus far. Because Deep Space Nine, I know I gave it a 93, but this one was better than the Deep Space Nine one because it did so many things. And just like you said, I appreciate when writing is done intelligently, smartly, and cohesively, to the point where basically you can watch this time and time again and keep pulling things out of it, like brand new things. And I've watched this episode probably about 4 or 5 times, and it's like I keep pulling stuff out. Like one of the other things, the last point I want to make, not only does he do that, the brilliant way that he wrote bringing the idea of bringing conflict together and criticizing Star Trek in a lot of ways, even in the very end with the reveal of William still alive and he joined Section 31. What does William do? Why is your badges like all like have to be this color? And he questions it. He questions the actual idea of Section 31, and the lady just looks at him and goes, "Listen, I could still put you out." And it's like, that was smart. That was a great punchline.
So interestingly, Dave, this is a guy that we need to keep our eyes open for. Ben Rogers was the writer of this episode, and this is the first episode he has written, but he has been with Lower Decks for all of its 3 seasons so far, but he has been just a story editor.
I think Mike McMahon has
he trained him. I think this is like an apprentice. This is the type of guy you put under your wing and say, "Listen, my friend, you've got some skill here. I'm going to go ahead and finesse this talent of yours."
Oh, easily. And if that's the case, then yes. Because like the fact that you jump from a really bad episode, probably the worst in Lower Decks history.
Yeah.
To suddenly the best.
Yeah.
In my opinion, the best.
It's good.
I think it's I hate to say that it's like comparing the 2 writers together because it's a little unfair.
Right.
Especially the last writer of the last episode. She didn't have a lot of experience. But when you got the skill and you know what you're doing, this is what happens.
Yep. Greatness happens. Okay, Dave, let's bring this show to an end. I want to thank everyone for listening. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Live long and prosper.